Hello everyone, welcome to Sounds from the Studio, brought to you by Contemporary Craft. Contemporary Craft fosters the use of traditional craft materials such as ceramic, fiber, glass, metal, and wood to make art. Our community honors the history and heritage of craft while showcasing modern, exploratory work.
And since our organization is located in Pittsburgh, PA, we decided to bring some of the stories of our exhibiting and studio artists to a broader audience by way of this podcast. I'm Rachel, the Executive Director at Contemporary Craft.
And I'm Kahmeela, podcaster and art enthusiast. We are your hosts for this journey, and there are many ways to keep up with us. You can go to the Facebook page and like it, Contemporary Craft, on Twitter at SCCPGH, Instagram at SCCPGH, or just go to contemporarycraft.org. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We just ask that you please follow, rate, and review, and also share alike.
This is an exciting episode for us. We're recording the day before we open Transformation 11 Works in Glass, which means we're also a day ahead of announcing the winner of the Raphael Prize. That means that by the time this episode airs, it will be public knowledge that our guest today, Lauren Kalman, is the winner of that prize. Before we dive into discussion with Lauren, a few quick notes about the exhibition. The Transformation series was created to promote artistic excellence and encourage innovation in the contemporary craft field in 1997. It's a way to celebrate the 25th anniversary at that time and honor the legacy of our founder, Elizabeth Betty Raphael. This now triennial jewelry exhibition recognizes an artist with a $5,000 prize and also features the work of additional finalists. For each run of the show, we focus on a different material within the field of craft, the current being glass. This show features 17 artists from 4 countries and showcases glass utilizing some of the most historic approaches and also features innovation of materials. I'm honored that today we'll be talking with Lauren, the Transformation 11 prize winner. So, Lauren, it's great to have you on the podcast today, and such a treat that we get to spend some time with you, given that our staff was fortunate enough to also eat lunch with you. For our listeners, maybe we can start by taking things back a little bit to the representative work that you submitted for consideration related to the Raphael Prize, which is Devices for Filling the Void. I was ecstatic to see that work come in through the submissions because I had seen portions of that body of work a few years ago. And from what I understand, the objects literally fill the voids of the body, your body, I believe, but more importantly, they supply kind of philosophical filling the voids. So, since our listeners aren't seeing the work as we talk, can you tell them a little bit about what these devices look like and maybe share about the context of that original work?
Cool. Sure thing. Thanks for having me too. I'm excited to be here, and it's such an honor, and I'm happy to talk more about the work. So I'll start off saying that my very early background was in jewelry and metalsmithing. So that's kind of my home base and what kind of got me into working with craft materials. Through metals, I came to glass and fibers and ceramic. So just a little bit of background there. So devices for filling a void are objects that they quite literally fill empty spaces in the body. I make molds of my body, my teeth, my palate, my nostrils, under my armpit. Anywhere there's a crevice, I probably have a mold of it. And these objects, I use these molds to make objects that plug into, say, my nose, or that fill my cheeks, that kind of hold the negative space under the arm. And there's sort of these either gold-plated electroformed copper objects, so they look kind of like a combination of jewelry and maybe a reconstructive surgery device, or maybe a kind of bodily amorphous growth, or they're white ceramic objects that also have this sort of bodily, rounded, kind of blobby form. And more recently, I've been doing these objects in glass. So using flame-worked borosilicate glass to make objects that fill the negative spaces of the body. And the exciting bit about the glass is that they're transparent. So you can actually see the body through the glass. Like, you can look right into the mouth.
How did this come to be?
I just woke up one morning and thought, this is what I should do. No, well, I'll add one more bit about that work too before I finish that. And that's, I also, I not only use my body to make the objects, but I also then reactivate them through photographs in devices for filling a void, but also in other work video. So they get worn again once they're objects. So they're both objects and performative videos and photographs. So how did we get here? So like I said, I started off making jewelry. I was trained in jewelry. I thought I would be like sort of a studio jeweler making functional jewelry. And what happened is that my work transitioned from being things that were jewelry to being about adornment, wearability, and then by extension, functional objects. So it was, instead of the object or what the work was, it became what the work was about. And so that really freed me up to do these more experimental, performative kind of objects that are still really deeply rooted in craft, but that deal with ideas of the body, constructions of femininity, that kind of thing. So that my training was in jewelry and metalsmithing. I also have a really traditional training in foundry. I worked as an apprentice at the Johnson Atelier Technical Institute of Sculpture, which was in Trenton, New Jersey. And there I was just learning the trade of foundry work. And so that was primarily large-scale figurative work. And so a lot of mold making, casting, which is a direct line into the mold making I do now. And then I went to graduate school for art and technology at Ohio State. And there I learned digital video, digital imaging. But while I was there, I was kind of rejecting my craft lineage and, sort of seeing it as this kind of, in my early 20s, seeing it as this sort of kind of conceptual hindrance, like it was this baggage that I was carrying, and I was too bound up in technique, and it wasn't allowing me to, it wasn't a conceptual exploration, which I totally don't think is the case now after some hindsight. But at that point, I was really kind of shunning my craft training, and I was doing like these really performative gestures, like gold leafing my hands, because the gold was like hindering my ability to think or something like that. So they were half-baked, knee-jerk things. But what happened was, like, I was in grad school and I was like, I need to document this because I need to get credit for this things I'm doing. Right? I know this is what 24-year-old brains are doing. And not fully formed till they're 25, I think.
I think that's right. 25, 26.
Yeah. Very reactional. But I started taking photographs of these like gestures, performative gestures I was doing with gold leaf. And there just ended up being something there. And I started looking at these photographs and seeing the potential for combining craft with performance. And that just sort of like, then craft kind of came right back in as a central part of my work. As making objects that interacted with the body in a way that kind of highlighted like the grotesque or undesirable aspects of the body, the places where, fluids spill. I'm always have been interested in the mouth, which is really transgressive part of the body. It's where the inside and outside meet. It's erotic. It's where, germs are spread. It's how we sustain ourselves through food. It's how we like assert power through language. I mean, this is really sort of like fascinating sight. So I'm combining that with objects that are made out of gold or look like they're made out of gold. It's all gold-plated copper. And so thinking about what happens when like this desirable object meets this sort of site of tension, there's like site that might be threatening, and thinking about value. So that's how I like started. And it really, that early work, in graduate school, it became like the seed and method for the rest of my career.
A lot of the work in this current body that we are showing, as well as the work that you're just discussing, when you talk about the body, it's actually your body that you're talking about. So how comfortable are you with that level of intimacy with others in the gallery? Or how did you come to a place where you were okay putting yourself out there so fully?
That's a great question.
Yeah, no, that is a good question. And so I'll start with it. I started working with my own body out of like convenience. Like it was the thing that was there, and I was using it, and it was free. And you know, as soon as I started making these photographs, like it became really, really evident that like the body that was in the images mattered. Like the body is not a neutral site. It comes with all sorts of, baggage, identity, like race, gender, perceived class, like all of that stuff. It then made sense for me to work with the body that I inhabit, that I know, that I can speak to, that of which the experience I can speak to, right? And that was part of it. It became part of the content of the work, and I know my own body and my lived experience so well that I didn't feel like I could represent another's body and ask another person's body to do what I ask of my own body. And so also sort of ethically, like a lot of my work, including some of the recent work, but especially my previous work involved, stitching gemstones into the body or, piercing the body with acupuncture needles, or even just doing like long durational kind of athletic poses that are quite uncomfortable. It didn't seem right to ask somebody else to do that, especially because my work deals with body politics and sort of dynamics of power in terms of constructing ideals, like all of that. And so to ask somebody else to do that didn't feel right. So it made sense that I used my own body. And I think this sort of also follows a lineage of performance art, right? So like thinking about, durational performance and performance artists that sort of explore the boundaries of their body. So it kind of ties back into those lineages as well. So it was a necessity for me to use my body. I have occasionally worked with other performers, but it never when I more than one person. But really, it has always come back to my own body. And that said, I don't see my work as self-portraiture. It's not like, what you see in my images of, me shoving things in my mouth and drooling, that is not how I live my life. So it's not a self-portrait in that way. Early on, when I started doing these performative works, I would, when I spoke about the work, refer to my body as the figure or the model. And like, I just early on needed that very like, I needed to disassociate in a way. But that started to become problematic. People would ask about, in lectures, like, well, who's the model and how do you do this to people? And I was like, well, it's me. Like, and so it just became, now it's like, I am the performer. It is not a sort of like self-representation. Of course I'm using my body and I'm making the work. So in some way, my self is in there, but, it just came over time. I became more and more comfortable with using my body, acknowledging that it is my body, and knowing that my work is different than me and my life and how I carry myself in the world. I certainly don't walk down the street exposing myself.
Well, yeah, it's just in a sense, it's like as if like an actor taking on a role, and we don't think that Anthony Hopkins is eating people, but at least I should hope. But Hannibal Lecter exists bigger than life. So yeah, I get that as to how you feel the need to disassociate yourself from that persona, and also it's kind of a way of protecting yourself from others' opinions as well as just kind of your own whatever uncomfortableness that you feel from exposing yourself as such.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I get questions like this a lot. And I think, I think part of it comes with like age and experience. Like I just feel more comfortable in my own body, in my existence in the world, that, I can let my work be my work, and I can be me, and they can coexist.
You had mentioned stitching gemstones into your body. And I saw one of the images, and you also mentioned acupuncture, and I'm assuming one of those images is acupuncture. Is that what you meant? You were just talking about the acupuncture aspect of stitching?
Yeah, it's a body of work called blooms, efflorescence, and other dermatological embellishments, and I recreated really common sort of skin markings, what we might think of as, blemishes, acne, shingles, really sort of common, bodily misbehaviors, if you will.
Bodily misbehaviors. Wow, I've never heard. I like that. I've never heard that.
Yeah, I like thinking about like the body being impolite as well, sort of not conforming to our polite constructions of culture and society. Right. The body will always find a way to undermine us.
Right.
That work used to attach the objects to the body. They were set in the body using acupuncture needles, or stitched into the body using, gold thread or suture thread. I was sort of thinking about that sort of discomfort of those actions being like a parallel to the discomfort of kind of adorning the body or becoming the ideal. I like high heels are the example, like that I like to use. I find them excruciating.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but we go through that pain to transform the body into something aesthetic. And so, in that way, that's how I think about some of the discomfort that happens in my work. It's about this sort of like Western dichotomy of like mind body, or like mind, being the superior over the body, or trying to control the body. But like I said, the body always somehow finds a way to like leak or dribble or to undermine that control.
Has there been a point, an idea that you've had and you've just like, okay, this is not going to work? Like, that you've pushed your body and yourself to the limit, and you've just like, that you've had to abandon whatever that idea was.
Yeah, I mean, not to the point of like kind of extreme pain or discomfort. I mean, that's not really my objective. I'm not. But I think rarely do things end up looking like I think they're going to look. Early on I would sort of sketch out the performative poses, and like, something wouldn't fit, or it would just, but inevitably through like the photographic or video making process, something else happens. And usually it's like the fifth or sixth or seventh iteration down the line that ends up being the most interesting, where like I'm a little less inhibited. I'm not trying to get the goal of the kind of initial idea. I'm just playing, and it gets weirder. And that's where interesting stuff happens.
Right.
So my mind is like definitely spinning now, because I'm thinking about the work that was selected that ultimately is what resulted in naming you as the Raphael Prize winner. And so for, again, people that are listening, Lauren, and I'm going to let you explain this because I'm not going to do due diligence, but essentially it's like cast body parts that are then blown glass vessels that rest on tables, like very elementary description and version of that we'll get from Lauren. But I want to kind of like dissect two parts of that, because it's really interesting to me now hearing you talk too about like the context and like the concept of that work and the human connection. And I think at some point I read within the description that there's pieces of that work that are also about like marriage and things. So like hearing all of this about like the individual body and self,
and then thinking about that context and those vessels, and having those images, yourself only. I'm really even more compelled to hear about what is the context behind that work, and then definitely want to talk about the process to get a much more educated version of like how those things were created for people.
Sure. So I'll start with a description of what they look like, which might be helpful in kind of explaining what they're about. So the kind of primary component of the work are blown glass vessels that have imprints of the body in them through being held, as if you were hugging something or carrying something or sitting something on your lap, right? So really common holding gestures. And accompanied by photographs of the objects being held. And so the title of the work, I'm oscillate between two titles, a long one and a short one. The full title is To Have or To Hold, or I'm just shortening it occasionally to Hold. It'll land on a title maybe a year from now when I've like actually made up my mind. But that comes from sort of like Western traditional marriage vows, to have or to hold until death do us part. But I've left off the until death do us part as something that's implied, this idea of loss. So I started thinking about this work actually through some ceramic objects. I was making, and still am, this is an ongoing project, making large-scale ceramic vessels, large for me, that is. They're about 2 feet tall, and I throw them and keep them wet, and then I pick them up and hold them. And through picking them up and holding them, the vessel gets distorted, but it also gets imprinted with my body through like giving it a hug. So what I was interested in with those objects is that, one, there's all this care that goes into making this perfectly formed, finished vessel, like time and labor and care. And then in a really fleeting gesture, that is distorted. And it's like sort of both this caring gesture, like this idea of wanting to hold something so close and so tightly that you distort it, that you or break it, or kind of make it imperfect, and also that you're imprinting on it, yourself on it. So like thinking about relationships where you kind of bend towards each other, right? Like you change in some way through being in a relationship. But it's thinking about ideas of smothering, right? Like wanting something so badly that you kind of smother it or kill it, or
of mice and men, like a Lenny.
So that's where, I was doing these experiments during the pandemic, and I can't say that it was like a one-to-one. Like, I'm sad, I'm thinking about the pandemic, but I think really it was just like a mental state, right? Like thinking about loss. I'd laid some of the groundwork for this in previous work, where I was, kind of thinking about how, when I distort objects with my body, it leaves an indent, but this was a really direct kind of thinking about that. And so I was working on that work as I was getting ready to produce this glasswork, and some things just really clicked, right? I was like, I want these to have a vessel format, so they're not just blobs; they are finished as like a vase on the top, and so they reference like a domestic object, like a vase that you might see in your house. Glass would be a material used for that, and then the glass objects have a very similar distortion, where they look like they've been held or hugged, or they're sitting on a lap. They become this sort of negative space, even more than the ceramic vessels, because they're transparent. Like, they reveal the absence in their transparency. and hold that space of emptiness.
So, I mean, a little bit more about that process then. So you had talked earlier about how you started approaching materials more from the lens of metals, and that you worked your way into glass, and then these are cast. What did that look like for you? How did you actually form what became the vessel?
Sure. So the vessels. Okay. So I'd started, doing some experiments in the body of work devices for filling a void, where I was using some of the castings or molds I made of my body to make plaster castings that I could, particularly my teeth, that I could use to bite onto glass bubbles. And so the imprint of the teeth was left in the glass, and then when I put them in my mouth, for the photographs, you could see, the teeth, the tongue, it becomes this kind of oculus to look in. And so, this is, using a mold to blow glass into is a pretty common, technique in the hot shop. One might use carved wood or bronze, and you make a bubble in glass and you blow into it, and it conforms into that interior hollow. So I kind of inverted that in a way. I made positives of my body. So I had a full body mold made. I worked with a foundry in Philadelphia called Independent Casting. This is a connection I have from my foundry days. The founder of Independent Casting, Jeb Wood, and I worked together. And so I contacted them to help me make this full body mold because I could not do it myself. And it just necessitated help. So we spent about 3.5, 4 days casting my body in segments. So I have this sort of archive of body parts: straight legs, bent legs, arms, wrists, or arms, hands, head, a straight torso, a bent over torso, that I could then kind of take those molds back to my studio and cast plasters that would sort of function like a puppet. So a hand on a stick, an arm on a stick, a torso that can be folded or unfolded, sitting or standing, so that I could take those to the hot shop. And this work, I will say, was made at the studio at the Corning Museum of Glass. Through the inaugural Burke residency, which was in partnership with the Museum of Arts and Design, their Burke Prize award and exhibition. And so I took these molds to Corning, and we used them as a proxy for my body, right? So because I can't hug a glass bubble, right, without severe burns. So we use the plaster to do that, and it was like manipulating a puppet. So I would have a hand, someone else would have a hand, someone else would have the elbow, and someone would be holding the bubble, and we would together hug this glass bubble.
That in itself is an interesting thought. It takes 3 people to hug, kind of thing. Like, just, this, like, you all working together to make this, to perform a hug. So,
yeah.
I don't know if I'm saying it properly, but yeah, it's just an interesting visual.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And I think there's like a real nugget there. I don't know what is there yet. I don't know what that,
right.
But something that process is really sort of fascinating and seductive.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like it's there. There's something there. I just can't see it yet.
It's so interesting. We're actually showing some work right now in our satellite gallery by quilts. Well, she's making quilts now. I shouldn't necessarily say she's a quilt artist. She works in a variety of media, one of them being photography. But there's something very like voyeuristic about her work. It's Barbara Weisberger, and so she has these quilts at the moment where it looks like body parts, and like the further away that you are from them, or if you snap a photo of them without really investigating what you're looking at, you look like you're looking at body parts, and they're assembled just in such a deconstructive way. But it's interesting to hear you say that, because I think of those quilts and the photographic imagery on them. Then I also think of like how amazing it would be to see the photographs in the hot shop of like people, hugging these vessels,
Right.
and just like, also, yes, some of the other work that we've talked about, like the erotic undertones or like the voyeuristic nature of like watching, like just using these body parts as puppets to create these objects. That seems really interesting too. Like, there's part of me that would love to see, like, here we have some photographs, we have some of the vessels on the table, but there's part of me that's like, wow, I would have loved to see like some of the cast body parts or some of the images as well as the process. But that's just because I'm such a process-oriented person.
Right.
But that's fascinating. Yeah, there's something really exciting about that.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I agree. So this is all such brand new work for me. While I have it, I work in a plain working studio. I have, a fair bit of casting experience. The hot shop is not my domain by any stretch of the word. So it was all new. It was all kind of a leap of faith. I had told the studio at Corning, like, okay, I'm bringing these plaster castings. Do you think this is going to work? And they're like, yeah, sure. So we were kind of, like building the plane as we were flying it. And I think so. It was wonderful. I mean, it's a really important thing, I think, especially for an artist kind of moving into into the third decade of making, right? Like, to be uncomfortable and vulnerable and unsure. And I think, you learn a lot in those spaces. And so, I think exploring the process, and how to do it without being like a gee whiz, like tutorial, but also thinking about the potential in making tools. Like the plasters are impermanent, but, bronze tools are a really common, tool, material to make for glass tools. And so like thinking about maybe I make some more permanent tools that become, part of a display or installation, without revealing every step of the process, giving these little hints and insights. But this is all kind of speculative at this point, but things I'm looking forward to exploring kind of, as I move forward. Because this work is really brand new. This is all, from making the molds to installing this week. We're looking at from March to early September. So it's real fresh.
Nice. Well, when did you accept that you were an artist?
I think I wanted to be an artist since I was, probably around middle school age. Both of my parents were in the commercial arts. My mother was a commercial photographer, and my father is now retired as an industrial designer. So more on the practical side of things. But, so I grew up in a household that kind of valued the arts. They both fell into it. My mom went to an arts high school. She didn't do particularly well in like the writing and the maths. And so that's this, how she happened. And my dad sort of fell into it as well. And I think in some ways it was just always like a practical, like, oh, you can make a living doing this. It wasn't, but they were very focused on, commercial arts and design. And I think when I decided to go to art school, they had maybe hoped I wouldn't. They knew how hard a field in the arts was. And then when I became a fine artist, I think they were just completely at a loss. But yeah, I think a little bit of perseverance and help me outlast expectations, maybe.
Do you recall your first exhibition?
Oh boy, my first exhibition period had to have been in like high school or something like that. Maybe a Scholastic Award show or something. I do recall one in particular. My dad's boss's son was also in the Scholastic show, and I beat him out.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So, a kind of standard question for me in this series that I like to ask, I think it's relative to the craft field, is have you had mentors in the field? And if so, who are they and why do you consider them as a mentor?
Yeah. I mean, I think mentor, I think about it in different ways. Like I've had, of course, a series of really amazing teachers along the way, that while I haven't had maybe close personal relationships, have been really fundamental in shaping my career. I've also worked really closely with some of these people. So there's like a big sort of spectrum of people that have impacted my career. I think the folks, especially that I trained with in undergrad, Joe Wood, Deb Todd Wheeler, and metals were really instrumental for me. George Greenemeyer at MassArt, who was my founder instructor, who really pushed me to apply to the apprenticeship at the Atelier, and also was like incredibly patient in listening to undergraduate problems. Like basically a thing. I don't know how to call it. And on through to, and I'm sure I'm missing like really key important people. So I don't mean to leave folks out, but the folks I worked with at the Foundry, which is a traditional apprenticeship model where you would work beside somebody who's much more skilled than you. Like all of those people and their generosity with their skills and time and patience was really instrumental. And I think in on through to my first teaching job, I taught at a tiny art school in Nashville called Watkins College, and my boss Terry Packer kind of not only hiring me as a really emerging artist and academic, but also mentoring me through that process of how does one enter the professional field, to the point, the elbow in the side, say this now, kind of things. I mean, I've had these really fantastic people, and my parents, of course, who supported my practice even when they really totally did not.
And then that's the beauty of, and that's just kind of what most parents' jobs should be. It's just I don't get it, but I know you can do it. I'm here for it.
Yeah, I think really we so often think about studio practices, and in particular the way we talk about art practices as being and art stars, it's a singular person doing this thing, but that's not what I've found to be the case. I have had help all along the way, from people hoisting me up on ropes, friends and family sticking needles in my back, to my partner helps print my photos now, on through to the studio assistants that I occasionally hire to make my work, help me make my work. There are things you just can't do alone. On through to working with institutions like Contemporary Craft, there are in order to make artwork happen and shows happen, there's an army of people making this profession function.
Yeah.
From directors to development folks to educational outreach, social media, all of that. Art handlers. It's a massive team of people that makes art happen.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people who either don't know that, don't realize that, or just forget it completely. And I know from being one of those people, one of those foot soldiers myself, like they all appreciate you for shouting them out and explaining that and expressing that.
Yeah. I mean, and I think, it just happened to be that my practice ended up being really forward facing. But I could have very easily and happily been on a track where I made other people's work. I mean, I liked technical work. I liked working in a foundry and, grinding tiny detail into a sculpture. And so I don't see that, I don't see it as a value hierarchy really in that way. Like we all need each other to do what we do. Museums need artists
Right.
need museums, you can't have a curator if you don't have artists.
Absolutely.
Right. So,
right.
and so I think, I think it's all super important. And I know a lot of folks who love their jobs, doing preparator work or, printing for hire, that is a really fulfilling part of the practice.
Yeah, it can all be very rewarding in its own right. And I, like I was saying, like my career for years had been to kind of help other artists see and get their visions out there and whatnot. And so, yeah.
And I think it should be acknowledged. Like, I do think it's important, I think it's important to acknowledge that this is a team.
Yeah.
This is a team sport here.
Well, of all of your artwork that you have accomplished or created or whatnot, do you have any that stand out as the most rewarding for you?
Oh man, yeah, that's tricky because it changes over the years. I mean, I'm always most geeked about what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. Okay. So right now at 2:52 p.m. at September 8th, 2022, what is your most?
I mean, I'm pretty jazzed about the new glasswork that's up at Contemporary Craft. It was really fun to make. Yeah. And like after when art becomes your job, it's not always fun.
Right.
And I felt incredibly vulnerable, but also really well supported. Like I totally trust all the people I worked with. And it ended up being just really fun to let go of control and trust other people and like be silly sometimes. And and that's what I'm pretty geeked about. So I'm excited to kind of see where that goes moving forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So, Rachel, unless you have any other follow-ups. Okay. So,
covered.
all right. Awesome. So, and then Rachel did mention that you were a little bit nervous about this question. And this is the funsy question that we ask. Supposed to be, you don't have to take it so seriously, Lauren. So we just ask all of our artist guests, what if you had 3 songs to describe your work, what would they be?
Oh man, yeah. So I've been asked this question before.
Really?
Like this is not the first time. I'm like, so is this like a thing?
So you should have a playlist already then.
I know.
I don't understand why it's.
I like Google my way out of it. So all right, well, so my first go-to thought is all things gold and shiny. So I think is it all that glitters by Latigra would be maybe one. Okay. And I was thinking Material Girl by Madonna, is kind of
classic.
Yeah, right? Heels and capitalism and consumerism and shininess.
That works.
But I pooped out on the third one. I just don't know.
What?
I don't have a third for you.
I will go ahead and I will suggest Beyonce, Get Me Bodied. How about that?
Oh.
I feel like we just really infuse the playlist because we collect these all, so it's a growing playlist of everyone's.
Yes.
Now we're covering everything from the classical to the beats and the gym. We got it all.
So I'm here for it. Yeah, absolutely. So listeners, make sure that you check out the Sounds from the Studio musical Spotify playlist because It'll be the right thing to do for your next gathering.
Yeah.
So Lauren, thank you so much for taking the time out and talking with us. Now is the time for you to shout out anything that you would like to, any upcoming works that you have or exhibits you have coming up, where people can find you online, blah, blah, blah. Spotlight is yours.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, well, first of all, super thank you. It was like delightful to talk with you both. So thanks very much for having me. Let's see what's up. Oh, so I do have a traditional website, which is laurenkalman.com. I'm also primarily on Instagram at Lauren Kalman, all one word. Where I'm moderately good at posting updates and shots of new studio work. What's coming up next? Let's see. I have a solo show coming up at Rochester Institute of Technology. That will be in October, which will be fun. Some devices for filling a void work, and probably also some new tab old work will be up. And I think actually beyond there, I'm just going to be in the studio, kind of cranking on some new work. So keep a lookout for that in 2023.
Right on.